O Muslims, this talk may not align with religion, so take the story only as a narration of events as they happened. 3-year-old Dorothy was playing and then accidentally fell down the stairs, hitting her head and losing consciousness. When her parents found her, she was not breathing. The doctor was called and rushed over immediately. Dorothy's mother collapsed when the doctor said there was nothing he could do as her little daughter had died. The doctor left and returned after 1 hour with Dorothy's death certificate. But during this conversation, they heard a sound of movement coming from Dorothy's room. They ran upstairs, and there she was, playing in her room as if nothing had happened. The doctor examined her again, and there was no sign of injury. He had no explanation, and said it seemed as if Dorothy had come back from the dead. He did not realize how true his words were. Dorothy Eady was born in London in 1904. Until her fall from the stairs and her resurrection, she was an ordinary little girl. But after the fall, she began to suffer from nightmares. Her mother would wake her up, and Dorothy would tell her about the dream. She was living in a huge building with columns, surrounded by trees and green gardens. It was always the same dream. Dorothy would tell her mother the same thing. "I want to go back home." When her mother told her she was at home, Dorothy would become frustrated and depressed. Sometimes her parents would find her muttering under the dining room table. They would ask her what was bothering her, and the answer was always the same: "I want to go home." When asked where home is, Dorothy used to say she didn't know, but she knew she wanted to go back there. After the fall, Dorothy sometimes spoke with a heavy foreign accent, which was so concerning that her parents had difficulty finding a babysitter. When Dorothy was 4 years old, her parents planned a day at the British Museum. They couldn't find anyone to take care of their daughter, so they took her with them. This is where things started to get really strange. As expected, 4-year-old Dorothy felt bored at the museum. She was whining, dragging her feet and behaving like most 4-year-olds. But Dorothy's mood changed dramatically when they reached the ancient Egypt exhibit. She was fascinated by the artifacts, but when she saw the Egyptian statues, she pulled away from her mother's grip and ran wildly through the halls. Dorothy was running from statue to statue, yelling at people for wearing shoes in the presence of the gods. Dorothy's mother was very embarrassed by her daughter's behavior, but Dorothy suddenly stopped and became silent. Her parents found her frozen in front of a glass case, staring at the face of an Egyptian mummy. Her mother picked her up, but she became upset. Then she said in a voice like that of an old woman, "These are my people." It took her parents a few hours to get her out of the museum, but whenever the family had free time, they would return to the ancient Egypt exhibit, the only place where Dorothy felt happiness and peace. When Dorothy was 7 years old, her father bought her a children's encyclopedia about ancient Egypt. Dorothy spent hours studying hieroglyphics using a magnifying glass. Her mother asked her about what she was doing. She would say, "I'm trying to remember." While reading a scientific magazine, Dorothy came across a picture of a temple built for Pharaoh Seti I, the father of Ramses the Great, in the town of Abydos. Dorothy was puzzled and asked her mother, "Where are all the trees and all the green gardens?" Her mother asked her, "What is this place?" Dorothy smiled the biggest smile of her life, pointed to the picture of Seti's temple in Abydos and said, "Mama, this is my home." There are thousands of documented cases. There are certainly thousands of other cases where parents are too confused or too embarrassed to report them. An interesting story happened in England in the year 1957. The sisters Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock, aged 11 and 6 years, were killed. 1 year after the accident, their mother, Florence Pollock, gave birth to twins. Gillian and Jennifer were identical twins, but they had different birthmarks. Jennifer had a birthmark on her waist that matched the birthmark Jacqueline had before her death. Is it a coincidence that she also had a scar on her forehead, just like Jacqueline? When the twins were about 2 years old, they started asking for toys that belonged to their sisters, even though they had never seen the toys before. They would also become frightened of moving cars and scream, "The car is coming to take us." And the coincidences continue. During the Battle of Iwo Jima, the Japanese shot down the American fighter pilot James Houston. The son died in the cockpit of the plane on the 3rd of March, 1945. More than 50 years later, 2-year-old James Leininger began having nightmares about being a fighter pilot crashing into the ocean and dying. When shown pictures, James was able to name the type of plane he was flying, knew the name of the aircraft carrier he was on, and even named other men who served with him. All this information was verified to be accurate when he was 2 years old. One of my favorite reincarnation stories is the story of Ryan Hammond. When Ryan was about 4 years old, he was playing alone. Ryan told his mother that he was a man who lived in Hollywood. Ryan's parents were Christians and serious in their faith and did not believe in reincarnation, but Ryan often said, "I was someone else. I was big. But now I am small. I preferred things when I was big and could go wherever I wanted. I hate being small." Whenever Ryan saw the Hollywood sign on TV, he would cry and say that was his home and he wanted to go back to it. Ryan would tell stories about meeting Rita Hayworth, vacations in Paris, and working at an agency where people change their names. This is not the usual talk of a 4-year-old child. One day, Ryan's mother brought a book about old Hollywood, and they browsed the pictures together. They came across a picture, and Ryan said, "Oh, look, this is George. We worked together in a movie. Oh, this man is me. They found me." The other man in the picture was Marty Martin. He knew Rita Hayworth, spent holidays in Paris, and worked at an agency where people changed their names. Ryan was right about everything. Ryan also knew that Marty danced on Broadway. And how many sisters did he have, and how many children? Ryan said his house was on a street with the word Rock. Martin lived on Roxbury Street. Marty's family was able to confirm 55 separate facts that Ryan got right when he was 4 years old. In these 3 cases, as in most cases, past life memories begin around the age of 2 or 3 and end around the age of 5. But that was not the case with Dorothy Eady. As she grew older, her memories became clearer. It was only a matter of time before Dorothy Eady discovered who she really was 3,000 years ago. Dorothy Eady was very outspoken about reincarnation, talking about it openly and not caring what others thought. This was a problem for a teenage girl in the 1920s, but others were not as tolerant. One Sunday afternoon, a priest appeared at the Eady family's door from Sunday school because she refused to sing a hymn that spoke poorly about Egypt. But the straw that broke the camel's back with the Sunday school teacher was the claim that Christianity is based on the ancient Egyptian religion. Well, this is debatable, but there is a lot of evidence supporting it, and it has been confirmed by Christians. Dorothy spent so much time at the British Museum that Egyptologist Sir Wallace Budge began teaching her how to read hieroglyphs. Unsurprisingly, she picked it up at an astonishing speed. Dorothy's dreams continued throughout this period, but now that she knew what was happening, she was no longer afraid. When Dorothy was about 15 years old, she would wake up in the middle of the night almost every night, hearing the voice of a man named Hora asking her to write down everything he said. She would enter a state of trance. Neither asleep nor awake, she would write notes and hieroglyphs. When she woke up, she didn't know what she had written, and it wasn't even her handwriting. After a year of this, she had 70 handwritten pages. She finally managed to piece together that this was the story of her life in ancient Egypt. She was an Egyptian woman named Bentreshyt, born in the town of Abydos. She came from a humble background. Her father was a soldier who served during the reign of Seti I. When Bentreshyt was 2 years old, her mother died. Unable to care for her, her father placed her in the temple of Kom el Sultan. When she was 12 years old, Bentreshyt was given two options: either leave the temple and go out into the world on her own, or become a consecrated virgin and stay in the temple. A few years later, she met Pharaoh Seti I, and they had a relationship. When she became pregnant with the pharaoh's child, she had no choice but to inform the high priest about her relationship with Seti I. The high priest told her that her sin against Isis was so severe that she would be tried. She was likely to face execution to avoid the scandal that might befall the pharaoh. Bentreshyt ended her life herself. Dorothy finally realized everything that had been happening to her over the following few years. She worked in various jobs at a theater owned by her parents, but she got her big break in the year 1931. A job opened in London for writing in an Egyptian public relations magazine. The 30s were a difficult period in Egypt, even though it was officially declared independent from the United Kingdom in the year 1922. The United Kingdom was still heavily involved in governing the country. Dorothy used her new position at the magazine to advocate for Egyptian nationalism and full independence. While working at the magazine, she began to communicate with a wealthy Egyptian man named Ayman Abdel Majid. In the year 1933, Ayman proposed to her, and she accepted and traveled to Egypt for the first time in her life. The first time in this life, right? And when she got off the boat in Cairo, she fell to her knees, kissed the ground, and cried, saying, "I am finally home." If Dorothy Eady had indeed reincarnated, she would now have the chance to prove it. Dorothy's marriage had a difficult start. Her husband's family was wealthy and did not like how open Dorothy was about her past life. Dorothy was more committed to Egyptian culture than her husband's family and was outspoken about it. A few years later, Dorothy and Majid separated, but not before she gave birth to a son whom she named Seti. So she named her son after the former pharaoh, which might be embarrassing for him. In 1935, she got a job at the Egyptian Antiquities Department and was the first woman ever employed there, but she quickly became known as a respected researcher. She published articles and studies on ancient Egypt and translated documents in hieroglyphics. Although Dorothy Eady did not receive any formal training, she became known as an expert in this field. Finally, in the year 1952, Dorothy managed to get a job in Abydos, the town she believed she had lived in as an eccentric character. She practiced the ancient Egyptian religion and walked barefoot everywhere, spending her nights praying and sleeping in Egyptian temples. In the year 1957, the new head of the Antiquities Department wanted to test Dorothy. He acknowledged that she had an amazing understanding of ancient Egyptian culture, but he didn't really believe that she had lived in the temple of Seti thousands of years ago. So one night, he took her to the temple, and the only light they had was a torch. Then he asked her to take him to different parts of the temple. At that time, nothing had been published about the layout of the temple, and Dorothy had not visited the place before in this life, right? Dorothy was able to guide him to any place he asked to go, without a map and without light. She knew every corner of the temple. After his sixth attempt to embarrass her, he gave up. One of her recurring dreams or memories, as she believes, was about the gardens of the temple of Seti, but they had not yet been discovered by archaeologists. Dorothy told the scientists where to find the gardens, so they dug and found them. She said that if they dug on the north side of the temple at a specific location, they would find a hidden tunnel. And indeed, the tunnel was there. In 1964, Dorothy turned 60 years old. According to Egyptian law, she was supposed to retire. But she was not only the first woman employed in the Department of Antiquities, she also received special permission to continue working. Egyptologists could not explain how, but she managed to make countless discoveries just by remembering. Although her specialty was the temple of Seti I in Abydos, she claimed to have knowledge of other ancient Egyptian sites. For example, she said that the lost tomb of Nefertiti was beneath the tomb of her stepson Tutankhamun. Was it under King Tut? Well, Dorothy made this claim in the year 1972. The tomb of Tutankhamun was found in the year 1922, and despite studying the tomb for 50 years, there was no evidence of a room there. But in the year 2015, radar imaging techniques showed that there was indeed a room in the place she said it would be. She also said there is a small library under one of the feet of the Sphinx. Well, she said there is a room under the Sphinx, and no one believed her. Years later, they conducted a survey, and there is the room. About 30% of Americans, including nearly 25% of Christians, believe in reincarnation. Reincarnation may be considered a fringe or pseudoscience in the Western world, but in the East, reincarnation is viewed differently. It is a central part of Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and many other religions. For about a quarter of the world's population, nearly 2 billion people, reincarnation is a fundamental doctrine. The Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism, is said to be the reincarnation of the first Dalai Lama, who died in the year 1474. The current Dalai Lama, who was born in the year 1935, is the 14th reincarnation of Pema Dorje. When the Dalai Lama dies, senior Tibetan monks conduct a complex search to find his next reincarnation. This search involves consulting oracles, interpreting visions, and reading spiritual signs. Senior monks may find clues from the body of the deceased Dalai Lama, such as the direction the body is facing. If the body is cremated, the direction of the smoke is observed as a potential indicator of the direction of the new birth. The current Dalai Lama was found at the age of 2, after a senior monk saw his village and home in a vision. Then the boy, who was named Lamo Tondup, was able to recognize items that belonged to the previous Dalai Lama, including a drum used in rituals and a walking stick. Although I consider myself an open-minded skeptic about the topics we cover on the Sawalif Warda channel, reincarnation is a subject I have always been fascinated by. There is comfort in the idea that death is not the end, and that our physical life is just a temporary experience meant to teach us lessons to prepare us for our next life or what comes after. Dorothy Eady is one of the most compelling cases of reincarnation I have ever seen. But is this really evidence? Skeptics will point out that while Dorothy Eady was able to identify many Egyptian tombs, tunnels, and rooms, she also made many mistakes. Some believe that when Dorothy hit her head during a fall down the stairs, her brain was injured. That this injury caused foreign accent syndrome, which is a real condition. The injury also caused her to develop obsessive-compulsive disorder, with her obsession centered around ancient Egypt. There is no doubt that if she developed this obsession at the age of 3 or 4, she became very skilled and knowledgeable about the subject. We certainly know that Dorothy Eady was admitted to mental asylums several times due to mental health issues, and all the stories about Dorothy's early life come from Dorothy herself. The fall, her experience in the museum, writing in a trance, the time she was tested in the darkness of the temple. There is no evidence that any of this happened. We have to take her words seriously, but this is the skeptic's point of view. Even renowned Egyptologists, who usually dislike anything mysterious, said that Dorothy's knowledge of Egypt went beyond the basic level. It was astonishing. They stopped short of saying she was reincarnated, but no one denies her contributions to the study of ancient Egypt. Dorothy Eady was dubbed the Saint of Egyptology. She spent her final years near Abydos, close to the Temple of Seti. She finally passed away in 1981. But I can't help but wonder, is there a child somewhere now dreaming and seeing visions they can't explain? Visions of a green garden in the desert, visions of an oasis calling them back home. Thank you very much for spending time with me today. And like most topics we cover on this channel, today's topic was suggested by you. So if there is a story you would like to see or learn more about, write it for me in the comments. That's all until next time. Stay safe, be kind, and know that you are appreciated.